a lot of people are speculating how much testosterone was this guy actually injecting to get a 55,000 nanogram per deciliter total T. Surely he must have been abusing the and using like, a bottle a day or something. That's what like people are saying. And I'm thinking,
Derek, you wanted to discuss Dallas McCarver's autopsy.
oh yeah. People, it's sort of been resurfaced as a topic because his blood test, and I was like typically when you see these kind of units of measurement, you would look in something like you wouldn't see it in a blood test typically. Like it was nanograms per milliliter, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And then when you convert it, people are like, oh, 550, that's nothing. And then you convert it over to nanograms per deciliter and it becomes 55,000 nanograms per deciliter of testosterone. But then so if you scroll down,
I'm sorry, guys. I'm using like a half finger.
no worries. Yeah, if you keep going down, what's really weird is the guy who posted this, his account has been banned. Anthony Roberts from Medium. I don't know what happened, but anyways, if you go down,
he gets banned everywhere.
Really?
Yeah, he gets banned in Professional Muscle and in this website and that website.
What do you do wrong? Do you know?
I don't know. He pisses people off. He is probably the first guy that talked about combining thyroxine with growth hormone. I think he's the one that brought that to the fitness industry. Or I remember reading it.
Are you thinking of? Are you thinking of?
It's Anthony Roberts, right? He used to write like steroid blogs.
No, aren't you thinking of what's his fucking name? The guy who made THG? Is that not who you're thinking of? What's that guy's name?
Oh, Patrick Arnold. No?
Yeah, that's not who you're thinking of.
Maybe.
Or Mike. I don't know. A lot of these
Mike
guys,
Arnold.
for some reason,
a lot of Arnolds.
Yeah, I don't know. Not that this guy's name is even close to that, but I mean, for some reason in my head, I was thinking, I thought this guy just reported on news, didn't do like pharmacology information.
I think Anthony Roberts is one of those old school steroid bloggers.
Anyway, so this is his blood test results. If you go up and you see everything's negative except for testosterone, and it's kind of interesting because this is literally like a sports panel almost. Leo, if you go down a couple,
so there was
down one more page,
and then there was testosterone, and then there was trenbolone.
Yeah, so here, scroll up a little bit. So stop here. So testosterone, 550 nanograms per milliliter. And then the interesting thing, though, is that testosterone to epitestosterone ratio, epi-T is not affected by the injection of exogenous T. It stays stable. So this is how you would detect if somebody's doping or not. And that's why it even says there it has that ratio. TDE less than 4 is considered normal, blah, blah, blah. This is like a doping parameter. So it's kind of interesting how like his epi-T ratio is like I probably have to actually sit down and math this out to see if this makes sense. But basically on paper, it's showing that he has a fucking ridiculous, unexplainable amount of testosterone, like 55,000 nanograms per deciliter, and then an undisclosed amount of trenbolone as well. But then it's also claiming the epi-T
there was a trenbolone positive.
Yeah. So they said it has like undisclosed quantity of trenbolone. So like I was thinking, a lot of people are speculating how much testosterone was this guy actually injecting to get a 55,000 nanogram per deciliter total T. Surely he must have been abusing the shit and using like, a bottle a day or something. That's what like people are saying. And I'm thinking, like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm wondering, like, obviously, even if you had tren in the system, to have even an artificially elevated level, like inflated by the trenbolone, if they were using electrochemiluminescence immunoassay to detect both compounds, and you hypothetically had a cross detection, you would still be on like bottles of shit, I would think. So I don't know if this was a.
What I think happened, and what the same thing has happened at the time, is that he got tren cough because they only checked the metabolites, right? And they see testosterone, but maybe testosterone can give or trenbolone can give a false positive for testosterone. So maybe he experienced tren cough. When you look at the size of his lungs, there were, all his organs were increased, and maybe there was some lung inflammation, would also lead me to think that trenbolone was involved. Maybe he got tren cough injected into a vein, and with his asthmatic past, he got a heart attack in the process. Maybe he couldn't breathe, or maybe he took insulin at the same time.
It seems
There was
I would think
unlikely.
he was
that-
on the borderline of death regardless, though, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
let's discuss that before we go back to the drugs. Let's just sorry, maybe we should share again so we can look at the top of it, because the top of the autopsy report went over his organs, and
Yeah.
this is really shocking stuff. Let's see, where is this the beginning of it? So if you look here, severe cardiomegaly, severe at the age of in his 20s with left ventricular hypertrophy characteristic of steroid abuse, coronary artery atherosclerosis, severe, and moderate in the right coronary.
Yeah, people were
severe in the
saying it
left.
was minor for some reason, but it's definitely
No,
it's not.
severe, severe. This is
Yeah.
very unusual in somebody that age. And then he had a thyroid cancer, nephrosclerosis, which means he had what Fuad WL has now, which is the sclerosis of the kidneys, which happens to a lot of bodybuilders, unfortunately, over the years. And then he had a large liver and large lungs. This is something really shocking, at somebody that age. So specifically, I mean, the large organs are just shocking. They don't see that very often, except on very obese people or odd things like that. But the one I wanted to talk about, guys, is the severe atherosclerosis at that age. Very unusual. It's not easy. You don't get severe atherosclerosis from using steroids. It doesn't happen that fast. You have to have genetic predispositions, and potentially you have to also eat a certain way, but at least severe genetic predispositions. Another thing is how big his heart was. So to think that to think that he had a trend cough and died, I mean, this guy seemed to be teetering on the edge of death anyway.
No, but he was fainting many times. So what it looks like is that all his organs were hypertrophied to a point he couldn't breathe. Like everything was just like the chest cavity only has limited space, and you can stretch it a little bit with pullovers. But it's all compressing against the lungs, right? And then the stomach is bulging, so the diaphragm is going up, so the heart is bigger, and all the other organs are just kind of constricting each other. And if you have,
You're not suggesting that if he wasn't using tren, he'd survive still.
no,
for a long period of
it
time.
was a point. At one point he was going to get it because he was avoiding all the blood work and the tests that he should have been doing.
I mean, let's talk about. I mean, wait, Derek, please continue about your theory about the trenbolone and testosterone. So, how are you thinking that he got that? Because what I wanted to just throw out there is I have a friend who's a professional athlete, and he takes 10,000 units of testosterone a week. So that does happen, brother. It's not like it doesn't happen. So and that guy's not as big as Dallas, and he's a professional athlete, world record holder. So and he's good at what he does. He takes 10,000 units of 10,000 milligrams of testosterone a week, and he doesn't and that's when he's taking just testosterone. When he's not taking just testosterone, he'll reduce the testosterone 5 grams, something like that, and take a couple of grams of tren or 20 anadrols a day or something like that. People do that. This isn't made up stuff. Now we look at Dallas. I mean, maybe he was very gifted, and maybe that's why his organs grew. Maybe he had a great IGF-1 receptor, and he was such a hyper responder. But it's also possible that he took a lot of testosterone if he was just taking 2 drugs, right? Yeah. Or maybe he was taking a lot of trenbolone, and it was confusing the results. I don't know.
Well, the thing that makes no sense. Well, I think it's partially Anthony Roberts' interpretation of the report. He's saying, on the first page, his testosterone levels were within normal range at the time of death, despite having an elevated epitestosterone level, indicating testosterone replacement, though not abuse per se. So he's interpreting this as if it's nanograms per deciliter instead of milliliters. And that's why he thinks 550 is normal. And then the EPT is normally like around, typically you wouldn't even see it in blood because it would be urine analysis. So I don't even remember off the top of my head what a normal nanogram per deciliter EPT level is in blood. So this is just a wrong interpretation by him, in my opinion. But it's just the fact that they are I was just on it and then I got kicked off. One sec. Don't scroll for me. I'm like on my own screen looking at it.
No, I was curious to see it again. Yeah, it's interesting that it's in milliliters, huh?
Yeah, so like if you convert that to nanograms per deciliter, like why? Okay, I think Anthony Roberts' interpretation is actually just throwing me off because he says he has an elevated EPT, but it's like you would not have elevations in epitestosterone if you're injecting testosterone because it's upstream in steroidogenesis, not downstream. So I don't know if that's even a relevant point to make. The thing that I just find baffling is that he could have a 55,000, and I guess, yeah, maybe people do inject that much, but what's the probability it's going to be literally an equal, like an even number like that, like 55,000 flat? And
well,
then,
there's an upper tolerable limit for many of these reference ranges.
Yeah, so then that calls into question, is this the upper tolerable limit though? Because this is supposed to be a toxicology report that holds up in court. So would you not have literally the exact value? And like, there's some people who think this is a typo and it's supposed to be nanograms per deciliter instead of nanograms per milliliter. But then it's a
ask Axis of Forensic Toxicology and see what the consensus is there.
Maybe because like it's almost more probable to me that like, okay, like obviously maybe he could have had 55,000, but it's just fucking wild to me that would be the case. But then that would also indicate he has a 4,000 nanogram per deciliter EPT level in his blood, which I would have to defer to the reference range on that. But that sounds fucking ridiculous too. Like that doesn't make any sense to me, because your testosterone to EPT, at least in urine analysis, would be in a 1-to-1 ratio typically. So why the fuck would your blood have 4,000 nanograms per deciliter of EPT if you like naturally you would only produce? That means your steroidogenesis cascade is producing 10 times higher epitestosterone than testosterone.
Well, epitestosterone, right? But it's testosterone is injected, right? So
wait, that's a 400. Sorry, my math is off. Okay, so actually maybe that does make sense.
So just so you know, sometimes people who have exaggerated cholesterol synthesis, they also have higher steroidogenesis. So maybe
I do see that too.
But by the way, Derek, you know the time that I found out that this athlete was taking 10,000, it really shocked me, because I had spent years on GH15. I started to believe those guys were lying, and I thought people really didn't take that stuff. And the athlete that I'm talking about was my hero from when I was a child. So when I was a teenager. So when I met him, and I was training, we became really close, and we were going to a competition, and I told him, what should I take for the competition? He said, I'm taking 10,000. I said, what? He said, I'm taking 10 grams. I said, of what? He said, testosterone. I said, you're taking 10 grams of only testosterone? He said, yeah. And he said, yeah. That's how he said it, like Craig Titus would talk. Yeah. I was like, oh, shit. But, I mean, that it does happen. So
it is more common than you think. If you start talking with the competitors, backstage, the drug abuse is substantial.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys downplay it. Oh, I have good genetics, I don't need so much. But they still run 4 grams a year. 6 grams. And then on top of the 6 grams is 15 units of growth hormone and 100 units of insulin and EPO and BPC and TB500 year round.
I can tell you one thing. In Dubai,
it's very clicky, so it doesn't leak.
It doesn't leak. But in Dubai, where people are more open, all those Middle Eastern guys you see that are very well formed. I mean, I used to talk to a lot of those guys back home. The average is 5 grams, 4 to 6 grams all year. They're always on that. And they mix them between things, like a gram of equipoise, a gram of this, a gram of that. That's the usual there. But I never heard 10 until I met this guy. I was like, is that possible? 10. Where do you put it? I told him, where do you put it? He said 3 cc's wherever I put it. You just, but it happens.
It happens.
There's another side to this, though, is like, maybe we could talk to the audience about, what do you think, what would you have done, Steve, what would you have done if say, if you had a client, which I know you don't coach like these, growing, people are abusing their health and stuff like that. But say you had a guy who wanted to do that. What were the things you would try to look out for to try to make sure that this doesn't happen to him? I mean, before this happened in Dallas, none of us were really thinking people could die in their 20s from atherosclerosis and cardiomegaly. But now that we know that, what would we do to try to prevent that?
I've seen many guys die from bodybuilding.
Sorry, I just want to go back to that numbers before we get off it, because I definitely fucked up when I was saying the 4,000 EPT. It's 400 nanograms per deciliter of epitestosterone. So Anthony Roberts' interpretation is based on urine analysis results in doping, and he's basing it off of, he thinks he's reading nanograms per deciliter, and then he's looking at the ratio to interpret this. So anyways, my whole point was basically, this looks like a 55,000 nanogram per deciliter total T that may be artificially inflated with trenbolone to some extent, but the best case scenario, he's still on like 5 grams of like 5+ grams of test and like a gram. I don't know how much trend, but like
just keep in mind that if you nick a vein and you inject 3 cc's into the bloodstream and it ends up there and you end up dying from a heart attack, it doesn't metabolize out of the bloodstream. So that's the levels might be.
I got
that
it.
might be artificially inflated. Yeah, that's what I said. Because I'm sure everybody's gotten tren cough at one point.
Okay, I understand what you mean now.
I mean,
so it's like literally seeped into his.
I just got it too.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like,
okay,
what
sorry.
is that? I thought you
Not a
meant
native
like
speaker.
that's why he died, not that that's why his blood
No, I
test
think-
results.
I think,
Yeah.
I mean, he was in the kitchen apparently, and maybe he administered an injection
No,
of
yeah,
test
that
or
might
trenbolone.
answer. That might
Right?
answer why everything's so high. Because it's like if you
Right.
had if you injected into a vein and then you get your autopsy report and there's like a ridiculous elevation, it could be your shot you just did like pulled right
Yeah.
into the blood. That makes
And
Are
sense.
these
then-
serum markers? These are serum markers.
Yeah, this is serum blood
Right.
test.
Okay.
At
And
first,
then,
I thought
you
it was
know-
a urine analysis based on the fact that there was EPT ratio, but at the top it says blood, femoral, comprehensive drug panel, and it says BLOO. I'm assuming it means blood, but it's really weird, dude, because typically you would never have a T to EPT ratio done in the blood. It would be a urine analysis. So, like, and you wouldn't be looking for trenbolone metabolites in blood either. You would be looking for it in urine.
No, they do that. They do that. They do the blood test and run it through the same measuring devices as the urine. But the urine is generally done because it's less invasive. But obviously,
like
in
it's
this scenario,
cheaper, yeah. But like
no,
in
it's
general,
not
when
cheaper. But you can't
you're
draw
looking for
blood from
metabolites,
athletes.
so you would be looking.
metabolites. You want to look for the urine because of the pharmacokinetics. It goes
Yeah,
through
so
the urine
that's
and
why
it
when I
studies all the urine, yeah.
Okay, anyway.
But they're still
But
present
this
in the
was some
bloodstream.
good detective work. Honestly, I learned quite a bit listening to you guys right
Yeah,
here.
so that's how I always interpret it. I mean, you're not going to get a blood level that high unless you accidentally leaked from the depot or injected directly into a vein, and that might have been the onset, the compounding factor that he passed. So let's speculate that there's, or not speculate because his organs were tremendously enlarged, and he had some asthmatic issues. He fainted on stage. So the way I always interpret it, he injected some trenbolone. He got tremendous tren cough, which led into a cardiac arrest, and that didn't allow for all these serum concentrations of testosterone or trenbolone to metabolize out. And now you test it, and you see that it's tremendously elevated. But it's just a moment in time, a very unfortunate moment in time where the guy passed.
Well, let's discuss.
maybe.
Let's discuss. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it. I was just saying that, yeah, that's certainly, at first I thought the tren cough was just like, well, maybe that's how it happened. I was like, okay, that's like random, speculation. But then
Yeah,
the fact that
speculation,
you're
of
using
course.
that as like the logic for why his serum might be so ridiculously elevated, that obviously
Right.
makes sense. So, like, I'm on the same page now.
Oh, and now we can add on to that also, which is that normally somebody wouldn't die from the tren cough. But the thing here that's going on, number one, he has pneumonia, he has enlarged lungs. But number two, most importantly, he has a very large heart with specifically severe atherosclerosis around the heart. So the heart is beating extremely, it's very difficult for him to pump all day. That heart is already, and what happens when the heart grows? Well, let's discuss this for a minute. What do steroids do to your heart exactly? I'll go through a list. Now, I've done some reviews on this personally, and I know Derek has done some videos on this, but let's summarize it. Number one is